The Friday night crowd at the Grand Meridian Hotel was buzzing with excitement. Rich people in fancy clothes filled every table in the huge ballroom. Diamond earrings sparkled under the bright chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Men in expensive suits talked loudly about their business deals, while women in designer dresses showed off their jewelry. The ballroom was massive, with marble floors that reflected the golden light from above. Round tables covered in white cloth were scattered across the room, each one set with shiny silverware and crystal glasses. Waiters in black uniforms moved quickly between the tables, carrying trays of expensive food and bottles of wine that cost more than most people made in a week. At the center of it all stood something truly special, a beautiful black Steinway grand piano. Its surface was so polished you could see your reflection in it. The piano bench sat empty, waiting for someone to bring it to life. This wasn't just any piano. It was the kind that famous musicians dreamed of playing, worth more than a fancy sports car. But tonight, there was a problem. The piano sat silent and still. Hotel manager Robert Chen paced back and forth near the front desk, his phone pressed against his ear. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. He had been making phone calls for the past hour, and each conversation ended the same way, with disappointment. "What do you mean you can't find anyone?" He whispered urgently into the phone. "This is the Grand Meridian. We have 300 guests tonight expecting entertainment." The scheduled pianist had called in sick just 2 hours before the event. Food poisoning, he claimed. Now Robert was scrambling to find a replacement. He had called every pianist in the city, but it was Friday night. The good ones were already booked at other venues, and the mediocre ones weren't good enough for the Grand Meridian's reputation. The guests were starting to notice. Conversations grew louder as people finished their main courses and looked around for the evening's entertainment. Some checked their expensive watches, wondering when the music would begin. Others asked their waiters what was happening with the piano. Among all the chaos moving quietly through the crowd was Ana Rodriguez. At 24 years old, she had been working at the Grand Meridian for almost 2 years. Her black uniform was perfectly pressed, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She carried herself with quiet dignity, even when dealing with the most demanding customers. Ana had grown up in a small apartment on the other side of town. Her family had immigrated from Mexico when she was 5 years old. Her father worked construction during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. Her mother took care of elderly people in their homes. Money was always tight, but they were proud people who worked hard for everything they had. What the hotel guests didn't know was that Ana had calluses on her fingertips. Not from carrying heavy trays or washing dishes, but from years of practicing piano. Hidden beneath her white service gloves were hands that had spent countless hours on piano keys, perfecting scales and learning complex pieces. As a child, Ana had found an old broken piano in the basement of her apartment building. The landlord was going to throw it away, but Ana begged her parents to let her have it. Her father spent weeks fixing the broken keys and tuning it as best he could. It wasn't perfect. Some keys stuck, others made no sound at all, but it was hers. She taught herself to play by watching videos on the library's computer and checking out music books. When she was 13, a music teacher at her school noticed her talent and offered free lessons after class. Ana practiced every day, sometimes for hours, dreaming of playing on stages in front of huge audiences. But dreams don't pay bills. When her younger brother Diego was diagnosed with a serious illness that required expensive treatments, Ana had to make a choice. College and music school would have to wait. The family needed money, and they needed it now. So she took the job at the Grand Meridian. The pay was good, especially with tips from wealthy guests. She could work double shifts when needed, and the money went straight to Diego's medical bills. She told herself it was temporary just until her brother got better. 2 years later, she was still there. Tonight, as Ana moved between tables in her section, she couldn't help but glance at the silent piano. She had walked past it hundreds of times during her shifts, always wondering what it would feel like to play it. The Steinway was everything her childhood piano wasn't. Perfect keys that would respond to the lightest touch. Rich tones that would fill the entire ballroom. She refilled water glasses and took dessert orders, but part of her mind was always on the music. When she heard classical pieces playing softly in the background during slower nights, her fingers would unconsciously move along with the melodies. She knew every piece by heart, could play them all if given the chance. "Excuse me, miss," called an elderly woman from table 7. "Do you know what's happening with the entertainment tonight?" "We were told there would be piano music." Anna smiled politely. "I believe they're working on it, ma'am." "I'm sure it will begin soon." But she could see the frustration growing in the room. Guests were finishing their meals and looking around impatiently. Some were checking their phones, probably thinking about leaving early. The hotel's reputation was built on providing a complete luxury experience, and tonight they were falling short. Manager Chen appeared at Anna's elbow, looking more stressed than she had ever seen him. "Anna, have you seen any of the other servers? I need everyone working perfectly tonight. We can't afford any more problems." "Yes, sir, everyone's been doing their best," Anna replied. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Chen looked at her for a moment, as if considering something, then shook his head. "Just keep the guests happy. We'll figure something out." As he walked away, Anna continued her rounds. She served coffee and cleared plates, always professional and efficient. But inside, her heart was beating faster. She kept looking at that beautiful piano sitting there unused while 300 people waited for music. She thought about Diego, lying in his hospital bed earlier that week, asking her if she still played piano. She had lied and said yes, not wanting him to know she had given up her music for his medical bills. She told him she still practiced, still dreamed of playing for big audiences someday. The truth was, she hadn't touched a piano in months. There was no time between her double shifts and visits to the hospital. Her calluses were fading, her fingers growing stiff from lack of practice. Sometimes she worried she was losing her gift, letting it slip away like sand through her fingers. But tonight, looking at that perfect instrument surrounded by people who would appreciate beautiful music, Anna felt something stirring inside her. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, the deep, burning desire to make music again. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. One conversation, one challenge, one moment of courage would unlock everything she had been holding inside. The girl who had learned to play on a broken piano in a basement was about to discover that some dreams are too powerful to stay buried forever. The stage was set. The audience was waiting, and somewhere in that ballroom, destiny was preparing to make its move. Table 12 was different from the others. While most guests at the Grand Meridian were wealthy but polite, Table 12 had a different energy entirely. At its center sat Jonathan Blackwell, a man whose money had never taught him manners. Blackwell was 45 years old, with perfectly styled gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than Anna made in 3 months. He owned half the commercial real estate in the city and made sure everyone knew it. His laugh was too loud. His voice carried across the room, and he had the habit of snapping his fingers when he wanted service. Tonight, he was holding court with 3 business associates and their wives. The men hung on his every word because they needed his approval for their deals. The women smiled politely because their husbands had told them to be nice to him. Everyone at the table was performing, playing their role in Jonathan Blackwell's little theater. "I'm telling you, Peterson," Blackwell said, waving his wine glass in the air, "the problem with this city is that people don't understand quality anymore. They settle for mediocre service, mediocre food, mediocre everything." He had already sent back his steak twice, claiming it wasn't cooked properly. The first time it was too rare. The second time it was too well done. The third steak sat in front of him, barely touched, while he continued his complaints. "Look at this place," he continued, gesturing around the ballroom. "We pay premium prices, and what do we get? A silent piano and waiters who look like they'd rather be anywhere else." Anna was approaching the table with a fresh bottle of wine, moving carefully between the chairs. She had been serving table 12 all evening, and each interaction had been more unpleasant than the last. Blackwell had made comments about her accent, questioned her knowledge of the wine menu, and generally treated her like she was invisible. "The wine selection here used to be world-class," Blackwell was saying as Anna reached the table. "Now they probably have some high school dropout picking the bottles." Anna bit her tongue and began refilling the water glasses. She had learned long ago not to respond to rude comments from customers. The tips were too important, and complaints to management could cost her the job. "And what's the deal with this piano?" Blackwell's voice grew louder. "We were promised entertainment. Instead, we get to stare at an expensive decoration." As Anna leaned over to fill his glass, Blackwell's eyes followed her movements. "What do you think, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "You probably know all about disappointment, right?" Anna kept her expression neutral. Is there anything else I can get for you, sir? Actually, yes, Blackwell said, sitting back in his chair with a smirk. You can explain to me why we're paying 5-star prices for amateur hour service. The conversation at nearby tables had started to quiet down. Other guests were glancing over, sensing the tension building at table 12. Anna could feel their eyes on her, waiting to see how she would handle the situation. I apologize if you're not satisfied with the service, sir, Anna said calmly. I'd be happy to speak with the manager if you'd like. Oh, I'm sure you would, Blackwell laughed. Pass the buck to someone else. That seems to be the theme tonight. One of his dinner companions, a woman in a pearl necklace, looked uncomfortable. Jonathan, maybe we should just enjoy our evening, she suggested quietly. No, Blackwell waved her off. I think this is educational. We're witnessing the decline of American work ethic in real time. As he spoke, his gaze drifted to the piano at the center of the room. Anna followed his look, and for just a moment her professional mask slipped. Something flickered in her eyes, longing, perhaps, or sadness. It was brief, but Blackwell caught it. Oh, what's this? He said, his voice taking on a new edge. Are you a frustrated musician? Let me guess. You came to the big city to make it in show business, and now you're stuck serving tables to people like me. Anna's hands tightened on the water pitcher, but she kept her voice steady. I'm just here to make sure you have everything you need for your dinner, sir. But you do play, don't you? Blackwell pressed, clearly enjoying himself now. I can see it in your eyes. You look at that piano like it owes you something. The table had gone completely quiet. Other guests were openly staring now, sensing that something uncomfortable was about to happen. Anna could feel her heart starting to beat faster, but she forced herself to remain calm. I should check on your main courses, she said, trying to redirect the conversation. Answer the question, Blackwell insisted. Do you play piano or not? Anna looked around the table, seeing the mixture of curiosity and discomfort on the faces looking back at her. She thought about walking away, about finding another server to take over table 12, but something in Blackwell's tone, the assumption that she was beneath him, that her dreams were somehow amusing, sparked something deep inside her. Yes, she said quietly. I do play. Blackwell's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Well, a multi-talented waitress. Tell me, where did you study? Juilliard, Berkeley, or maybe the prestigious YouTube University? His companions shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The woman in pearls was looking down at her plate, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. But Blackwell was just getting started. I bet you're one of those people who think they're artists, he continued, playing pop songs on a keyboard in your apartment and dreaming of Carnegie Hall. Anna felt her face growing warm, but not from embarrassment, from anger. She thought about all the hours she had spent practicing, all the sacrifices she had made for her family, all the dreams she had put aside to pay for her brother's medical treatments. Actually, sir, she said, her voice still controlled but with a new steel in it, I've been playing classical piano for over 15 years. Blackwell threw back his head and laughed, a loud, mocking sound that carried across the ballroom. Classical piano? Oh, that's rich. What's next? Are you going to tell me you're a composer too? Other guests were starting to murmur among themselves. Some looked embarrassed by Blackwell's behavior, while others seemed curious about where this confrontation was heading. The entire ballroom had taken on a different energy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. You know what I think? Blackwell said, leaning forward in his chair. I think you're just another dreamer who couldn't make it in the real world. Classical piano, give me a break. You probably can't even play Mary Had a Little Lamb without sheet music. Anna's professional training told her to walk away, to find the manager, to defuse the situation before it got worse. But something else was telling her to stand her ground. She thought about Diego in his hospital bed, asking if she still played. She thought about the broken piano in the basement where she had learned to make music despite everything working against her. I can play quite a bit more than that, sir, she said, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. Blackwell's smile widened. He was enjoying this immensely, performing for his audience of dinner companions and neighboring tables. This was better than any entertainment the hotel could have provided. Prove it, he said simply. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge thrown down in an old Western movie. Anna looked at him, then at the piano, then back at him. Around them, the ballroom had grown noticeably quieter as more people tuned into the drama unfolding at table 12. I'm working, Anna said finally. Are you scared? Blackwell taunted. Come on, if you're half as good as you claim to be, this should be easy. Walk over there and show us what 15 years of classical training looks like. He gestured toward the piano with a flourish, his voice carrying to tables throughout the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, raising his wine glass, we have a classically trained pianist among our service staff. What do you say we give her a chance to entertain us? A few people clapped politely, not sure what else to do. Others looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. Anna could feel dozens of eyes on her now, waiting to see what she would do next. The moment stretched out like a taut wire, ready to snap. Anna looked at the piano one more time, its black surface gleaming under the chandeliers. She thought about all the reasons she should walk away. Her job, her family's financial situation, the risk of making a scene. But she also thought about the music inside her, locked away for too long. She thought about the girl who had taught herself to play on a broken piano, who had dreamed of making beautiful music for people who would appreciate it. Jonathan Blackwell sat back in his chair, confident that he had won. He had put the waitress in her place, shown everyone at his table how the world really worked. In his mind, she would mumble some excuse and disappear, another dreamer crushed by reality. He had no idea that he was about to witness something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The ballroom had become eerily quiet. Conversations that had been flowing all evening suddenly stopped as people sensed something important was happening. Waiters paused in their duties, holding trays of dessert and coffee, as they watched the scene unfold at table 12. Anna stood perfectly still beside Blackwell's chair, the water pitcher still in her hands. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, from the wealthy guests in their designer clothes to the kitchen staff peeking out from behind the service doors. The moment felt suspended in time, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Blackwell lounged back in his chair, a satisfied smirk on his face. He had played this game many times before, putting people in their place, showing them exactly where they stood in his world. In his experience, people like Anna always backed down when challenged. They made excuses, mumbled apologies, and faded back into the background where they belonged. Well, he said, his voice carrying across the quiet ballroom, we're all waiting. Show us these amazing classical skills you've been bragging about. Anna's mind raced. She thought about her supervisor's warnings about keeping customers happy, no matter what. She thought about the stack of medical bills on her kitchen table at home. She thought about Diego, who would need another surgery next month if his condition didn't improve. But she also thought about something else. The way music had always been her escape, her sanctuary, her truth. When everything else in her life felt chaotic and uncertain, the piano had been the one place where she could be completely herself. You know what the problem is with people like you? Blackwell continued, enjoying his moment in the spotlight. You live in Fantasyland. You think because you can play a few songs, you're somehow special. But the real world doesn't care about your dreams. His words hit Anna like physical blows, but they also awakened something fierce inside her. She had heard variations of this speech her entire life, from teachers who assumed she couldn't afford music lessons, from guidance counselors who steered her toward practical careers, from well-meaning relatives who said music was a nice hobby but not a real job. The woman in pearls at Blackwell's table looked increasingly uncomfortable. Jonathan, she whispered, maybe that's enough. No, Blackwell waved her off. This is educational. Everyone here needs to understand the difference between dreams and reality. He turned back to Anna with a cruel smile. So what's it going to be, sweetheart? Are you going to put your money where your mouth is? Or admit that you're just another wannabe? Anna set the water pitcher down on a nearby service station with deliberate care. Her hands were steady now, her mind crystal clear. She had reached a decision that surprised even her. All right, she said quietly, but her voice carried perfectly in the silent ballroom. I'll play for you. Blackwell's eyebrows shot up. He had expected her to make excuses and slink away. This was an unexpected development, but an entertaining one. Excellent. This should be amusing, but, Anna continued, and something in her tone made Blackwell's smile falter slightly. When I'm finished, you owe every person working here tonight a public apology. The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. Blackwell stared at Anna as if she had just spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me. You heard me, Anna said, meeting his gaze directly. You've spent the evening insulting the staff, questioning our competence and treating us like we're beneath you. If I can prove that your assumptions about me are wrong, then you admit that maybe your assumptions about everyone else here are wrong too. Blackwell's dinner companions exchanged glances. The woman in pearls looked fascinated despite herself. One of the businessmen cleared his throat nervously. They had never seen anyone challenge Jonathan Blackwell like this. That's quite a bet for a waitress to make, Blackwell said, his voice colder now. What happens when you embarrass yourself up there? What happens when you prove that I was right all along? Anna thought about this for a moment. Then I'll apologize to you and to everyone here for wasting their time. And I'll work your table for free for the rest of the evening. Murmurs rippled through the nearby tables. This had turned into something none of them had expected. A real confrontation with real stakes. People were pulling out their phones, sensing that something worth recording was about to happen. Blackwell studied Anna's face, looking for signs of doubt or fear. But her expression was calm, almost serene. She had made her decision and seemed completely at peace with it. "You're serious about this," he said. "Completely serious." Blackwell looked around the ballroom, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. He had backed himself into a corner with his big mouth, and now he had to see it through. Besides, what could a hotel waitress possibly play that would impress anyone here? This would be over in minutes, and he would have proven his point about knowing your place in the world. "Fine," he said, spreading his hands wide. "You've got yourself a deal. But I want everyone here to witness this." He stood up and raised his voice to address the entire ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, our waitress here claims to be a classically trained pianist. She's offered to demonstrate her skills for us." More phones came out. People at far tables stood up to get a better view. The hotel manager, Robert Chen, appeared from the back of the room, looking confused and slightly panicked about what was happening in his ballroom. Anna untied her apron with steady hands, folding it neatly and placing it on the service station. Underneath, her simple black uniform looked stark against the elegant backdrop of the ballroom, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. "What are you going to play?" called out someone from the audience. Anna paused, considering. She had thousands of pieces in her memory, from simple scales to complex concertos, but tonight felt like it called for something special, something that would show not just technical skill but emotional depth. "Chopin," she said simply. "Ballade number 1 in G minor." A few people in the audience gasped. Anyone with classical music knowledge knew that piece. It was notoriously difficult, the kind of composition that separated amateur players from serious musicians. It required not just technical precision but deep emotional understanding. Blackwell frowned. He didn't know much about classical music, but he could tell from the audience reaction that Anna had chosen something significant. "Never heard of it," he said loudly. "Sounds pretentious to me." Anna smiled for the first time that evening, not a polite service smile but something genuine and confident. "You'll recognize it when you hear it," she said. She began walking toward the piano, her server's shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. Every step felt momentous, like she was walking toward her destiny, rather than just across a ballroom. The crowd parted to give her a clear path, and she could feel the energy in the room shifting from skeptical curiosity to genuine anticipation. Behind her, she heard Blackwell addressing his table companions. "This should be good for a laugh," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Something about Anna's certainty had unsettled him. Anna reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment, running her fingers lightly across its polished surface. It was even more beautiful up close, a perfect instrument that had been waiting all evening for someone to bring it to life. She adjusted the bench to the proper height and sat down, her back straight, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The ballroom had fallen completely silent again. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to watch. Anna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about Diego in his hospital bed, about her parents working multiple jobs to pay the bills, about all the dreams she had set aside for her family's sake. She thought about the broken piano in the basement where she had first fallen in love with music. But mostly, she thought about the music itself. The way Chopin had poured his heart into every note, the way this particular piece told a story of struggle and triumph, the way music could transform both the player and the listener. When she opened her eyes, Anna was no longer a waitress in a hotel ballroom. She was a musician, ready to do what she was born to do. She placed her hands on the keys and prepared to change her life forever. The ballroom had become eerily quiet. Conversations that had been flowing all evening suddenly stopped as people sensed something important was happening. Waiters paused in their duties, holding trays of dessert and coffee as they watched the scene unfold at table 12. Anna stood perfectly still beside Blackwell's chair, the water pitcher still in her hands. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, from the wealthy guests in their designer clothes to the kitchen staff peeking out from behind the service doors. The moment felt suspended in time, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Blackwell lounged back in his chair, a satisfied smirk on his face. He had played this game many times before, putting people in their place, showing them exactly where they stood in his world. In his experience, people like Anna always backed down when challenged. They made excuses, mumbled apologies, and faded back into the background where they belonged. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet ballroom, "we're all waiting. Show us these amazing classical skills you've been bragging about." Anna's mind raced. She thought about her supervisor's warnings about keeping customers happy no matter what. She thought about the stack of medical bills on her kitchen table at home. She thought about Diego, who would need another surgery next month if his condition didn't improve. But she also thought about something else, the way music had always been her escape. Her sanctuary, her truth. When everything else in her life felt chaotic and uncertain, the piano had been the one place where she could be completely herself. "You know what the problem is with people like you?" Blackwell continued, enjoying his moment in the spotlight. "You live in Fantasyland. You think because you can play a few songs, you're somehow special. But the real world doesn't care about your dreams." His words hit Anna like physical blows, but they also awakened something fierce inside her. She had heard variations of this speech her entire life, from teachers who assumed she couldn't afford music lessons, from guidance counselors who steered her toward practical careers, from well-meaning relatives who said music was a nice hobby but not a real job. The woman in pearls at Blackwell's table looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Jonathan," she whispered, "maybe that's enough." No, Blackwell waved her off. "This is educational. Everyone here needs to understand the difference between dreams and reality." He turned back to Anna with a cruel smile. "So what's it going to be, sweetheart? Are you going to put your money where your mouth is, or admit that you're just another wannabe?" Anna set the water pitcher down on a nearby service station with deliberate care. Her hands were steady now, her mind crystal clear. She had reached a decision that surprised even her. "All right," she said quietly, but her voice carried perfectly in the silent ballroom. "I'll play for you." Blackwell's eyebrows shot up. He had expected her to make excuses and slink away. This was an unexpected development, but an entertaining one. "Excellent. This should be amusing, but," Anna continued, and something in her tone made Blackwell's smile falter slightly. "When I'm finished, you owe every person working here tonight a public apology." The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. Blackwell stared at Anna as if she had just spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Anna said, meeting his gaze directly. "You've spent the evening insulting the staff, questioning our competence, and treating us like we're beneath you. If I can prove that your assumptions about me are wrong, then you admit that maybe your assumptions about everyone else here are wrong too." Blackwell's dinner companions exchanged glances. The woman in pearls looked fascinated despite herself. One of the businessmen cleared his throat nervously. They had never seen anyone challenge Jonathan Blackwell like this. "That's quite a bet for a waitress to make," Blackwell said, his voice colder now. "What happens when you embarrass yourself up there? What happens when you prove that I was right all along?" Anna thought about this for a moment. "Then I'll apologize to you and to everyone here for wasting their time. And I'll work your table for free for the rest of the evening." Murmurs rippled through the nearby tables. This had turned into something none of them had expected, a real confrontation with real stakes. People were pulling out their phones, sensing that something worth recording was about to happen. Blackwell studied Anna's face, looking for signs of doubt or fear. But her expression was calm, almost serene. She had made her decision and seemed completely at peace with it. "You're serious about this," he said. "Completely serious." Blackwell looked around the ballroom, suddenly aware of how many people were watching. He had backed himself into a corner with his big mouth, and now he had to see it through. Besides, what could a hotel waitress possibly play that would impress anyone here? This would be over in minutes, and he would have proven his point about knowing your place in the world. Fine, he said, spreading his hands wide. You've got yourself a deal, but I want everyone here to witness this. He stood up and raised his voice to address the entire ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, our waitress here claims to be a classically trained pianist. She's offered to demonstrate her skills for us. More phones came out. People at far tables stood up to get a better view. The hotel manager, Robert Chen, appeared from the back of the room, looking confused and slightly panicked about what was happening in his ballroom. Anna untied her apron with steady hands, folding it neatly and placing it on the service station. Underneath, her simple black uniform looked stark against the elegant backdrop of the ballroom, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. "What are you going to play?" called out someone from the audience. Anna paused, considering. She had thousands of pieces in her memory, from simple scales to complex concertos, but tonight felt like it called for something special, something that would show not just technical skill but emotional depth. "Chopin," she said simply. "Ballade number 1 in G minor." A few people in the audience gasped. Anyone with classical music knowledge knew that piece. It was notoriously difficult, the kind of composition that separated amateur players from serious musicians. It required not just technical precision but deep emotional understanding. Blackwell frowned. He didn't know much about classical music, but he could tell from the audience reaction that Anna had chosen something significant. "Never heard of it," he said loudly. "Sounds pretentious to me." Anna smiled for the first time that evening, not a polite service smile, but something genuine and confident. "You'll recognize it when you hear it," she said. She began walking toward the piano, her server's shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. Every step felt momentous, like she was walking toward her destiny, rather than just across a ballroom. The crowd parted to give her a clear path, and she could feel the energy in the room shifting from skeptical curiosity to genuine anticipation. Behind her, she heard Blackwell addressing his table companions. "This should be good for a laugh," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Something about Anna's certainty had unsettled him. Anna reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment, running her fingers lightly across its polished surface. It was even more beautiful up close, a perfect instrument that had been waiting all evening for someone to bring it to life. She adjusted the bench to the proper height and sat down, her back straight, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The ballroom had fallen completely silent again. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to watch. Anna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about Diego in his hospital bed, about her parents working multiple jobs to pay the bills, about all the dreams she had set aside for her family's sake. She thought about the broken piano in the basement where she had first fallen in love with music. But mostly, she thought about the music itself, the way Chopin had poured his heart into every note, the way this particular piece told a story of struggle and triumph, the way music could transform both the player and the listener. When she opened her eyes, Anna was no longer a waitress in a hotel ballroom. She was a musician, ready to do what she was born to do. She placed her hands on the keys and prepared to change her life forever. The first person to applaud was an elderly gentleman sitting near the back of the ballroom. He had been a classical music lover for 70 years, had attended concerts in Vienna and New York, had heard some of the greatest pianists of his generation. He knew extraordinary music when he heard it, and what he had just witnessed was nothing short of extraordinary. His slow, deliberate clapping seemed to break the spell that had held the entire ballroom captive. Like ripples spreading across a still pond, the applause began to spread from table to table, person to person, until the entire room erupted in thunderous appreciation. But this wasn't polite dinner party applause. This was something deeper, more primal, the sound of 300 people who had just experienced something that touched their souls. People leaped to their feet as if pulled by invisible strings, their hands coming together in a rhythm that seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers overhead. Anna sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the applause washed over her like a warm wave. She had dreamed of moments like this during all those lonely hours practicing on her broken piano, but the reality was more powerful than anything her imagination had conjured. The kitchen staff had abandoned all pretense of working and crowded into the ballroom, adding their voices to the celebration. Miguel, the head chef who had always been kind to Anna, was wiping tears from his eyes with his apron. Carmen, Another server, who had become Anna's closest friend at work, was jumping up and down like she had just witnessed a miracle. Even the usually composed hotel manager, Robert Chen, found himself applauding with genuine enthusiasm. In 30 years of managing luxury hotels, he had overseen countless entertainment events, but nothing had ever moved him like this spontaneous moment of pure artistry. But perhaps the most dramatic transformation was happening at table 12. Jonathan Blackwell sat frozen in his chair, his face pale and his mouth slightly open. The smugness and superiority that had defined his entire evening had evaporated completely, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: genuine humility. His dinner companions were on their feet with everyone else, but Blackwell remained seated, staring at Anna as if seeing her for the first time. And in a way he was. The person he had dismissed as just a waitress had just revealed herself to be an artist of incredible depth and skill. The woman in pearls leaned down toward him. "Jonathan," she said softly, "that was absolutely beautiful. You have to admit you were wrong about her." Blackwell nodded slowly, still processing what he had just witnessed. "I was wrong about everything," he said quietly. As the applause continued, Helen Morrison, the Music Academy director, made her way through the crowd toward the piano. She was a small woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that had identified musical talent for over 4 decades. Tonight, she had just witnessed one of the most impressive performances she had ever seen outside a professional concert hall. "Excuse me, dear," she said to Anna, who was still sitting at the piano trying to process what had just happened. "May I have a word with you?" Anna looked up, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Helen smiled warmly. "Everything is more than all right. My name is Helen Morrison, and I'm the director of the Riverside Music Academy. What you just did up there was absolutely extraordinary." "Thank you," Anna said, still somewhat dazed. "That means a lot coming from someone like you." "Where did you study?" Helen asked, her professional curiosity fully engaged. "Your technique is flawless, but more importantly, your musical interpretation shows real maturity and understanding." Anna's expression grew complicated. "I'm mostly self-taught, actually. I had some lessons in high school, but I couldn't afford formal training after that." Helen's eyebrows shot up. "Self-taught? You're telling me that you learned to play Chopin like that without formal conservatory training?" "I practiced a lot," Anna said simply. "Music has always been important to me." Before Helen could respond, other people began approaching the piano. The elderly gentleman who had started the applause introduced himself as a retired music professor. A young couple mentioned that they were professional musicians themselves and wanted to express their admiration. Person after person came forward to praise Anna's performance. But Anna kept glancing over at table 12, where Jonathan Blackwell still sat in stunned silence. Their bet hung in the air between them, unresolved. She had fulfilled her part of the bargain, but what would happen next? Finally, Blackwell stood up and walked slowly toward the piano. The crowd parted to let him through, and conversations quieted, as people sensed that the evening's drama wasn't quite over yet. He stopped a few feet from Anna and looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more thoughtful, completely stripped of its earlier arrogance. "I owe you an apology," he said, his words carrying clearly in the still excited ballroom. "I owe everyone here an apology, but especially you." Anna stood up from the piano bench, facing him with quiet dignity. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do," Blackwell interrupted. "I made assumptions about you, about everyone who works here, based on nothing but my own prejudices. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." He turned to address the entire ballroom, his voice growing stronger. "I want everyone to hear this. Tonight, I learned something important about making judgments about people based on their circumstances, rather than their character or abilities." The crowd listened intently as Blackwell continued. "Anna, you've shown me that talent and dignity and artistry can be found anywhere, worn by anyone. I was an arrogant fool, and I hope you can forgive me." Anna looked at this man who had spent the evening insulting her and her colleagues, who had challenged her to prove herself in front of hundreds of strangers. But she also saw someone who was genuinely changed by what had just happened. "Apology accepted," she said simply. The crowd burst into applause again, this time celebrating not just Anna's musical performance but the human transformation they had all witnessed. Blackwell extended his hand to Anna, and when she shook it, she could see that his eyes were wet with tears. As the applause died down, Helen Morrison approached Anna again. I meant what I said earlier, she told her. Your talent is exceptional. Have you ever considered formal training? Anna's expression grew sad. I would love to, but it's not possible right now. My family has some financial obligations that require me to work. What if I told you that wasn't an obstacle? Helen asked with a mysterious smile. What if I told you that there were people who would be very interested in supporting your musical education? Before Anna could respond, Blackwell stepped forward. Ms. Morrison is right, he said. I think I speak for everyone here when I say that we've just witnessed something truly special. And special things deserve to be nurtured. Other guests began nodding and voicing their agreement. The businessman who had been moved to tears mentioned that his foundation supported young artists. The society woman talked about her husband's scholarship program. Person after person stepped forward with offers of help and support. Anna looked around at all these strangers who had become invested in her future in the space of a single evening. Just an hour ago, she had been an anonymous waitress serving dinner. Now she was surrounded by people eager to help her pursue her dreams. I don't know what to say, she managed. Say yes, Helen Morrison encouraged her. Say yes to the possibility that your life can be different. Say yes to the dreams you've been putting aside. Anna thought about Diego in his hospital bed, about her parents working multiple jobs, about all the practical reasons why this seemed impossible, but she also thought about the music she had just shared, about the way it had felt to be truly herself for the first time in years. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Yes, I want to try. The ballroom erupted in celebration once more, but this time it felt different. This wasn't just applause for a beautiful performance. It was the sound of a community coming together to support someone's dreams. It was the sound of possibility being born. As Anna stood surrounded by new friends and supporters, she realized that her life had just changed forever. The girl who had learned to play on a broken piano had just discovered that some dreams are too powerful to be contained by circumstances. And in the back of her mind, she could already hear the music she would play tomorrow, and the day after that, and for all the days to come. The applause seemed to go on forever, washing over Anna in waves that grew stronger instead of weaker. What had started as appreciation for her musical performance had transformed into something much more powerful. A celebration of human potential, of dreams realized, of barriers broken down by sheer talent and courage. People weren't just clapping anymore. They were cheering, whistling, calling out words of encouragement. The businessman from table 6 shouted, "Bravo!" while wiping tears from his cheeks. The society women who had spent the evening discussing charity galas were now talking excitedly about how they could help support Anna's musical education. Even the hotel staff had joined the celebration. Servers who had been quietly doing their jobs just minutes before were now cheering for their colleague, who had just revealed herself to be something extraordinary. The busboys stopped clearing tables to applaud. The bartenders came out from behind their stations to get a better look at the woman who had just transformed their workplace into a concert hall. Anna stood beside the piano, still trying to process what had just happened. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from nerves now, but from the adrenaline of having shared her deepest self with 300 strangers. She looked out at the sea of faces, all focused on her with warmth and admiration, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The pure joy of being truly seen and appreciated for who she really was. Helen Morrison, the Music Academy director, had tears streaming down her cheeks. In 40 years of teaching and working with young musicians, she had rarely encountered raw talent of this caliber. But more than Anna's technical skill, what moved her was the emotional depth of the performance. This young woman hadn't just played notes, she had shared her soul. Extraordinary, Helen whispered to herself. Absolutely extraordinary. At table 12, Jonathan Blackwell's transformation was complete. The man who had started the evening as an arrogant bully had become something else entirely, someone humbled by the recognition of his own prejudices and limitations. He stood with the rest of the crowd, applauding harder than anyone else, as if he could somehow make up for his earlier behavior through the enthusiasm of his appreciation. His dinner companions watched him in amazement. They had known Jonathan for years as a harsh, judgmental man who took pleasure in putting others down. To see him moved to tears by a hotel waitress's piano performance was almost as shocking as the performance itself. "I've never seen him like this," whispered the woman in pearls to her husband. "It's like he's a completely different person." As the applause finally began to die down, Anna wiped the tears from her cheeks and tried to find words adequate to the moment. But before she could speak, her supervisor, Robert Chen, appeared at her side, his own eyes wet with emotion. "Anna," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "in 25 years of working in hospitality, I have never seen anything like what just happened here tonight. You've honored this hotel, this staff, and yourself." More people began approaching the piano. The elderly music professor who had started the applause introduced himself as Dr. William Hart, Professor Emeritus from the city's University Music Department. A young woman revealed herself as a pianist with the local symphony orchestra. A middle-aged man mentioned that he owned several music venues in the city and would love to discuss performance opportunities. Each person who approached brought not just compliments, but concrete offers of help. Helen Morrison pressed her business card into Anna's hand with a promise of a full scholarship to her academy. Dr. Hart mentioned that he still gave private lessons to exceptional students and would consider taking Anna on. The symphony pianist talked about connecting Anna with other professional musicians in the city. "I can't believe this is really happening," Anna said to Helen Morrison as the crowd around them continued to buzz with excitement. "Talent like yours doesn't stay hidden forever," Helen replied. "Tonight it just happened to reveal itself in a particularly dramatic way." But perhaps the most surprising offer came from Jonathan Blackwell. After waiting for the initial crowd to thin out, he approached Anna with obvious nervousness. The confident, commanding presence he had displayed earlier was completely gone, replaced by genuine humility. "Anna," he began, then stopped and cleared his throat. "I don't have any right to ask this after how I behaved tonight, but would you allow me to help support your musical education?" Anna looked at him in surprise. "Mr. Blackwell, you really don't need to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted firmly. "I spent the evening demonstrating exactly the kind of prejudice and arrogance that keeps talented people from getting the opportunities they deserve. Let me try to make up for that in some small way." He pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back before handing it to her. "That's my personal phone number. I meant what I said about supporting your education. Whatever you need, tuition, living expenses, a better instrument to practice on, consider it done." Anna stared at the card in her hands, still processing this complete reversal of fortune. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me help," Blackwell replied. "Say you'll give me a chance to prove that people can change, can be better than they were." Around them, the ballroom was still buzzing with energy, but a different kind now. Instead of the elegant but somewhat cold atmosphere of a luxury hotel dinner, the space had been transformed into something warmer, more human. Strangers were talking to each other about music, about dreams, about the power of unexpected moments to change lives. The kitchen staff had finally returned to their duties, but they moved with a different energy now. They were part of a workplace where something magical had just happened, where one of their own had revealed herself to be extraordinary. Carmen, Anna's friend from the serving staff, kept looking over at the piano with pride and amazement. "I can't believe you never told me you could play like that," she said to Anna during a quiet moment. "All this time I thought I knew you." "I didn't know I still had it in me," Anna admitted. "It's been so long since I really played, since I let myself be a musician instead of just someone who used to be a musician." As the evening began to wind down and guests started to leave, each one made sure to stop by the piano to offer personal congratulations to Anna. She collected more business cards than she had ever seen in her life, each one representing a potential door opening in her musical career. The elderly gentleman who had started the applause was among the last to leave. He approached Anna with a gentle smile and took her hands in his weathered ones. "My dear," he said, "I want you to know that I've been listening to classical music for 70 years. I've heard Rubinstein and Horowitz and Van Cliburn. What you did tonight was worthy of any concert stage in the world." He pressed something into her hand, a small, elegant program from a concert at Carnegie Hall. "I was there the night Van Cliburn made his debut," he explained. "I kept this program because it was the night I witnessed the birth of a great career. I want you to have it now because I believe I've just witnessed another one." As the last guests filtered out of the ballroom, Anna found herself alone with the piano once more. The room was quieter now, but it felt different than it had at the beginning of the evening. The silence was full of possibility rather than emptiness. She sat down at the bench one more time and played a single note, the same G that had started her performance of the Chopin ballade. But now it sounded different, richer somehow, as if the piano itself had been changed by what had happened. Helen Morrison appeared beside her one more time. Anna, I want you to understand what happened here tonight. You didn't just give a beautiful performance. You reminded everyone in this room why music matters, why art matters, why we need to look beyond the surface of things to find the extraordinary that exists everywhere around us. Anna nodded, still somewhat overwhelmed by the evening's events. It feels like a dream. The best dreams, Helen replied, are the ones that come true when we're brave enough to reach for them. As Anna finally prepared to leave the ballroom, she took one last look at the piano that had been the instrument of her transformation. Tomorrow she would still be Anna Rodriguez, but she would no longer be just a waitress with hidden dreams. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey toward becoming the musician she was always meant to be. The girl who had learned to play on a broken piano had just discovered that her own spirit was unbreakable too. Anna woke up the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. Still groggy from the emotional exhaustion of the previous evening, she reached for it without thinking, expecting maybe a text from her mother or a work schedule update from the hotel. Instead, her screen was filled with notifications she had never seen before, missed calls from unknown numbers, text messages from people she didn't recognize, social media notifications that seemed to multiply even as she watched them. Her heart started racing as she sat up in bed. What was happening? The first video she found made her gasp out loud. Someone had recorded her entire performance from the night before and posted it online with the caption, "Hotel Waitress Stuns. Ballroom with incredible piano performance." The video had been shared thousands of times overnight, and the comments were pouring in from around the world. "This gave me chills," wrote someone from Australia. "I'm a classical pianist and this is absolutely incredible," commented a user from Germany. "She needs to be on a concert stage immediately," demanded another viewer from New York. Anna scrolled through more posts, each showing her performance from different angles. People had recorded it on their phones during the standing ovation, capturing not just her playing but the emotional reaction of the entire ballroom. One video focused on Jonathan Blackwell's transformation, showing his face changing from smugness to awe to tears. Another captured the kitchen staff crowding into the doorway, some of them crying as they listened. By the time Anna got out of bed, the videos had been viewed over 2 million times. Music blogs were picking up the story. Local news stations were calling her phone. Her simple life as a hotel waitress had become an international sensation overnight. The first call she answered was from her supervisor, Robert Chen, but his voice was excited rather than concerned. "Anna, you need to get down here as soon as possible. We have reporters at the hotel asking about you, and I've been fielding calls all morning from music schools and talent agents." "Reporters?" Anna's voice came out as a squeak. "Mr. Chen, I don't understand what's happening. Haven't you seen the videos? You're famous, Anna. The whole world is talking about what happened here last night." Anna's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. Famous? She was a waitress from a small apartment who sent most of her paycheck to cover her brother's medical bills. She wasn't prepared for fame, didn't even know what that meant for someone like her. Her phone rang again, this time. It was Helen Morrison from the Music Academy. "Anna, dear, I hope you're sitting down," Helen began. "I've been getting calls since 6 this morning from music schools all over the country. Juilliard wants to set up an audition. The San Francisco Conservatory is offering a full scholarship sight unseen. And that's just the beginning." Anna felt dizzy. This can't be real. Oh, it's very real. But here's the thing, you need to be prepared. This kind of viral attention can be overwhelming, and you'll need guidance on how to handle it properly. By noon, Anna's story was trending on every major social media platform. News outlets were calling it "The Waitress Who Silenced a Ballroom" and "A Cinderella Story for the Digital Age." Music critics were weighing in on her technique, praising her interpretation of the Chopin Ballade and speculating about her musical future. The comments weren't all positive. Some people questioned whether the whole thing was staged, a publicity stunt by the hotel. Others made cruel remarks about her appearance or her background. A few classical music snobs claimed that one good performance didn't make someone a real musician. But for every negative comment, there were 10 positive ones. People shared their own stories of hidden talents and deferred dreams. Musicians offered advice and encouragement. Music teachers talked about the importance of making classical music accessible to everyone, regardless of their background. Anna's brother Diego called from the hospital, his voice full of excitement and pride.
Anna, the nurses are showing me the videos on their phones.
You're on the news. They're calling you a sensation. I can't believe this is happening, Anna told him, still overwhelmed by the sudden attention. I can, Diego replied firmly. I always knew you were special. I just didn't know the whole world was going to find out all at once. The most surprising call came that afternoon. Jonathan Blackwell's assistant contacted Anna to set up a meeting. When they met at a quiet coffee shop away from the hotel, Blackwell looked like a different person than the arrogant man from the night before. Anna, I need you to know that I've been thinking about last night all morning, he began. What happened wasn't just about your incredible talent. It was about me confronting my own prejudices and assumptions. He pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table between them. I want to do more than just apologize. I want to make sure that what happened to you doesn't just become a viral moment that fades away. You have real talent that deserves real support. Anna opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a check for more than she made in 2 years at the hotel. This is too much, she protested. No, it's not enough, Blackwell replied, but it's a start. This should cover your brother's medical expenses for the next year and give you the freedom to pursue your musical education without worrying about money. Anna stared at the check, tears forming in her eyes. Mr. Blackwell, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Use this opportunity to become the musician you're meant to be. And maybe someday when you're performing at Carnegie Hall, remember the night when a rude businessman learned that talent can come from anywhere. The media attention continued to grow throughout the week. Anna did her first television interview on the local morning show, then a longer segment on national news. Music magazines wanted to feature her story. Concert promoters started reaching out with performance opportunities. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other working people who had seen their own dreams reflected in Anna's story. Emails poured in from nurses who painted in their spare time, from construction workers who wrote poetry, from retail employees who sang in local bands. Anna's story had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt their talents were overlooked or undervalued. A week after that fateful night at the Grand Meridian, Anna stood in her small apartment looking at dozens of acceptance letters and scholarship offers spread across her kitchen table. Schools that had once been far beyond her reach were now competing for her attention. Her phone rang one more time. This time it was her parents calling from work. Mija, her father said, his voice thick with emotion. We saw you on the news. We always knew you were special, but seeing the whole world recognize it, we're so proud. We love you, her mother added. And we want you to know that whatever you decide to do next, we support you completely. Anna looked around her apartment, the same small space where she had practiced for hours on a broken keyboard, where she had worried about paying bills and taking care of her family. But now it felt different, full of possibility instead of limitation. The girl who had learned to play piano in a basement had just discovered that the whole world was willing to listen. Her life had changed forever in the span of a single evening, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary moments come when we're brave enough to show the world who we really are. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new dreams to pursue. But tonight, Ana Rodriguez was simply grateful for the music that had always lived inside her, and for the courage she had found to let it out. 6 months later, Ana Rodriguez stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, her heart pounding with the same intensity it had that night at the Grand Meridian Hotel. But everything else had changed completely. Gone was the simple black uniform of a hotel waitress. Tonight she wore an elegant midnight blue gown that Helen Morrison had helped her choose, her dark hair styled professionally for her debut performance with the New York Philharmonic. The transformation was remarkable, but what mattered most was that the music inside her had finally found its proper stage. The journey from viral sensation to serious musician hadn't been easy. After accepting Helen Morrison's scholarship offer, Ana had thrown herself into intensive study at the Riverside Music Academy. She practiced 8 hours a day, worked with the best teachers money could buy, and slowly built the technical foundation that would support her natural talent. There had been challenges. Some classical music purists questioned whether someone without formal training from childhood could truly master the repertoire. Critics worried that her sudden fame was built more on novelty than substance. Anna had to prove herself over and over again, not just